All right, we are back with another segment of our draft special. We're moving on to some pass catchers. My blood's starting to flow. I mean, that's something we really need as well. We got some coverage for the next couple years, but we could use some youth. And this first guy, he's got youth, he's got speed, he's got everything you can want. Let's jump right into it. Sammy, start me up.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Talking Titans.
Levis towards the end zone. Got a man. Touchdown. Wow. And it's the fourth TD pass of the day in the debut of Will Levis.
The sickest Tennessee Titans podcast. It's going to be sick.
All right, we're back again to talk draft prospects with our own John Vogel. We are moving on to some pass catchers. This next guy has skyrocketed up my board. Honestly, you, in my opinion, I might even put him over Marvin Harrison now, only because of his interviews and the way he's spoken to the media. And I heard he stayed late at the combine and worked on some stuff. All things you want to hear. I'm speaking of Rome Odunze out of Washington. John, give us some background on this guy. Obviously, upside is through the roof. What stands out for you when you look at Rome?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up doing some extra stuff at the combine, because there's not many wide receivers that you see come in from a premier Power 5 school that had a really long season and, went to the national championship and do the complete workout. He did everything at the combine, except for the bench press, but that's
scored well too.
Yeah, and tested extremely well. 4.45 in the 40-yard dash, 39-inch vertical, which is well above average for wide receivers. 10.4 broad. I mean, and even his change of direction stuff too was good. So, we're talking about a 6'3", 212-pound number one wide receiver when we talk about Rome Odunze. From a testing and measurable standpoint, he's kind of built like Alshon Jeffrey was when he came out of South Carolina. But I think he's a little bit more explosive, and I think that he's a better route runner. And one of the things that kind of helped Washington, throughout the season as they made the national championship run that they did, was having this guy working those intermediate to deep routes, and him and that building the chemistry with Michael Penix Jr. was fantastic. Odunze, he's a crafty route runner. He's really smart about the way that he sets up defenders, and he's got a really great catch radius, very strong hands, and is a very solid number one wide receiver prospect for sure.
So it's very hard to pass up to me. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr., everyone's falling in love with the name, and I've been saying it on the podcast for months now. Rome would be a number one wide receiver in any other draft class. It's just a Marvin Harrison Jr. name that everyone's falling in love with. I see him now sliding down because it kind of rubs me the wrong way. I don't know about you, since you're the draft guy. It rubs me the wrong way that he did not Marvin Harrison Jr., he did not work out at the combine, and he did not work out the Ohio State Pro Day. To me, guys like Rome that's busting his ass, and Neighbors, and all these other guys that are on the board that have potentially be the number one wide receiver in this draft class should they should be looked at even more. I mean, you got a guy from Washington who has 170 catches, 2,700 yards, and 20 touchdowns in the last two seasons. I mean, those numbers are unheard of for wide receivers. But some things that scare me with him, he's great. He's a little undersized with weight, 212. He's listed as I'm looking at right now, and people are saying that he's kind of lazy when he's against a savvy cornerback. Do you see that in his game at all? Or are you just going to see him like coming to the NFL like Jamar Chase-esque, because he's getting comps as Jamar Chase-esque? Do you see him coming in the NFL and taking right over again?
Fit is such a huge thing with the draft, and being able to come in and get the right scheme. You asked to do the right things and have the right players around you to build that chemistry. The draft is such an imperfect process, in the sense of that there's no rhyme or reason half the time. And we're really just making the best prediction that we can based off of, a million factors that are going to affect it. So I think that there's a really good chance he could come in and affect, be really productive immediately. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get him working those intermediate routes, over the middle. And those work the best in the NFL when you're coming off of play action. And I don't know if the Titans are going to run a lot of play action this year. but they have in the past. That's one thing that they did really, really well for a couple of years, especially
then
when
just
Tannehill
stopped
was at his best.
on a
Right.
dime.
Right. Well, you had the Derrick Henry starting to lose his effectiveness, as a runner, made people respect the run a little bit less and made them a little less likely to bite on the play action. So it didn't work as well, I think, was part of the problem. But, that when you get a really good play action offense running, it opens up that middle of the field 15 to 20 yards downfield extremely well, because now the linebacker, that is playing that zone is bitten up, and now he's trying to recover. You can throw it right over him. So if you look at the way that they kind of at the routes and what they kind of asked DeAndre Hopkins to do last year in the offense, it's Odunze fits that extremely well, because they liked him in that intermediate range, not necessarily stretching the field. He can do that too, but you really in that intermediate range where you can just get him 15, 20 yards, hit him as soon as he comes out of his break. You got that little bit of separation there. As for the laziness, I didn't really see that as much. I think that could be a little bit overblown. I think the people are going to point to the Oregon game when they was matched up against some good guys in that secondary. And I think part of that was, both of those Oregon games was them trying to open up opportunities for other guys, and he was a decoy. So you want to see him play a little bit harder if that is indeed the case and he was a decoy. But that's part of the role is, hey, I just have to keep this guy right here and not chasing the play 10, 15 yards down the field. We're about to send this route over the top. So as long as I keep him here on me, we're good.
Does it scare you a little bit, like for Washington? I know it's a Power 5 school, but like the last good – I mean, if I'm wrong, you guys can tell me, but the last good wide receiver that came out of Washington was John Ross, and he was an absolute total bust. In my opinion, ran well. He was a speedster. But to me, I think Rome is way built different. I mean, 92 catches this past season, almost damn near 1,700 yards and 17 touchdowns. I mean, the guy is an absolute number one wide receiver. That's why I'm saying that he is not slowly, but he is slowly becoming my favorite wide receiver in this draft class.
Yeah, and when you go back to Ross, and people don't like it when I say this, but Ross was really a one-trick pony where he had that crazy speed and he could take off down the field. That's really what he did well at Washington. He had a quarterback that could get him the ball pretty darn consistently. I think that was Jake Locker, was it not? That was thrown to him most of the time. Ironically, right? Crazy.
John Ross?
So, yeah.
No, he wasn't throwing to John Ross.
Yeah, 2011. Locker was
John
Ross.
John Ross came out in like
12.
2017. Really? No
Pretty sure it's 12, was it not?
No way.
Looking
John
right
Ross
now.
was like
2012.
I could be way off. John Ross was drafted in 2017. So no, he was not
okay.
by Jake
I was
Locker,
off.
Yeah.
Okay, I was off then. My bad.
No, all
You
good.
can cut that out. No, I was thinking he was 2012 for some reason. I don't know why I was getting that mixed up. Okay, but anyways, Ross, right? One-trick pony. He was a one-trick pony back then. So when you look at Odunze, he's not that. He's multifaceted. You can run him in the comebacks. He's really good through his breaks. That's one of those things that you want to look for in a wide receiver. It's funny. I was at the Senior Bowl this year, and Jerry Rice was there because his son Brandon Rice is in this class and was at the Senior Bowl, and so I got the opportunity to talk to him for a few minutes, and we were talking about Brandon and how he played. And I said, yeah, I didn't think he had a bad week. He's, oh man, Jerry's over there. Man, I wish he would just run lower. Wish he'd get down. Quit. I'm trying to get him to understand he's got to run all the way through his route at lower. Keep his hips down, not hit the top of his break and drop his hips and then come back up. And he's like, you're telling the DB where you're going. And I went back after Jerry had told me that. And I looked at, a lot of the great route runners, a lot of the great guys that have done it in the league. And they all do have that in common, where they run so low that when they hit their break, they're just through it. They're not throwing their heads around. They're not throwing their shoulders around. They're not doing all this fancy stuff to make that defender go somewhere. They're just hitting that break and they're gone, and nobody knows that they're there. And, that's kind of what you see Rome pull off, especially when he's running some of his more complex routes, is he runs really low to the ground for a 6'3" dude, and he gets through his breaks incredibly fast. So, that gives you a lot to work with from a schematic standpoint, because it's saying, hey, I know I can work this guy in timing concepts. I know that he can stretch the field, but I know that he's going to be at his best 15 to 20 yards over the middle on one of those in-breaking routes. He hits those to the sideline really well as well. So when you have an advanced route tree like Rome does, it's a huge bonus as an offensive designer.
Now, Brian Callahan was part of the staff in Cincinnati that drafted Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell. Obviously it seemed like it worked out for both sides, although Joe Burrow has suffered 2 season-ending injuries in his first 4 years in the league. Should we put any stock into what they did in that situation, into this situation that we're currently in? Do you think we can bypass on one of these premier tackles for a guy like Rome Odunze?
And that's a good question. Personally, I wouldn't. And it goes back to you want to have your offensive line shored up. But if you also, let's take that Bengals example and let's examine it for a second. Yeah, they went to the Super Bowl. But what ultimately cost them the Super Bowl? They didn't have a left tackle, right? Yeah. So now, ever since then, in the last 2 years since that Super Bowl, how much has Cincinnati spent on their offensive line?
A lot of money.
Is that something that the Titans want to do, or do you want to stay young and try to keep those costs down right now and focus on
it? It hasn't worked. All the money they've spent,
and they're in another. They just dropped another crazy amount of money on another offensive tackle. In this agent class, and so in Trent Brown from New England. So if you look at what the Bengals did, got them to the Super Bowl. Yeah, got Joe Burrow. The guy that he had the chemistry with back in school. And, I would have done the same thing most likely in that place. But they didn't have a plan on the offensive line, to get Burrow that protection. They went all in that year. They got to the Super Bowl. They couldn't pull off the win. And since then, they've spent crazy money trying to revamp their offensive line because they couldn't hit on their picks. That's the other thing, too. So it goes back to what is the plan that the Titans have to address the offensive line? Are they going to do it in the draft? Are they going to do it in the future? Or do they have a guy they're already looking at next year going, this guy would be really, really good for us? And, if we could get the capital and assess that to get him next year, we should do that. That's kind of the question that you have to ask yourself, if you're the Titans putting the plan together. So it depends what the plan is.
Yeah. We'll have to see.
You personally, you wouldn't do it.
No. And it's because, just think also too, how much are you paying DeAndre Hopkins? And again,
14 million.
No, you're going to pay him for another year, right?
Yeah.
And then he's probably gone because, he's starting to get old and you're not going to want to keep him around for the money that he's going to want. So is there a wide receiver that you like next year?
Or even in the second round. This wide receiver class is very deep.
Yeah.
It's a crazy deep wide receiver. Yeah. Crazy deep class. So that's, your first round guy doesn't have to be, hey, we're going to replace DeAndre Hopkins right now, because you've got guys you can give that red shirt year to that could come in there and step up. A couple guys to think about right off the top of the bat. Devon Havale out of Utah could be a guy in the third, fourth round that you pull the trigger on, that if he takes a year to develop, he's going to have that same type of size and athletic ability where you can stretch the field and play in those types of, that type of a role. But you're not going to ask him to do it right away. There's another one. So you got a lot of guys in this class that you can kind of lean on and get later on and still address the offensive line in time. But Rome would be crazy fun.
Yeah, I like I said, his interviews really jumped off the page for me too. He seems like a really dedicated guy, and like I've stated a million times over, you're never going to win a Super Bowl without everyone fully bought in, and you need everyone bought in for every play. And unless you have a guy like Patrick Mahomes, then you can pretty much get away with just figuring out a way to win no matter what. But outside of that, we'll have to see. I love Rome. I wouldn't be upset in any way if we picked him up, but we'll see how the cookie crumbles. We're going to move on and jump into our next player. Sammy, you can send us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Talking Titans on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.